Greetings all, and welcome to Sprues. In today's video, we're going to have another inbox review, this time of two kits from Eduard, both of them F6F-3 Hellcats in 1/72 scale. And I wanted to have a look at both of these kits because one of them, as you'll see, is the Profipack, and the other is the Weekend edition. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how the Weekend and the Profipack kits compare and what you do and don't get in both of them. This is actually a second-hand one, so they have some slightly more modern box art, typically a golden one, as I'll talk about a bit later. But otherwise, the tooling of both of these kits is identical, and what you get with the Profipack is still what you get when you get a more recent edition of it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, we'll start off with the basic Weekend edition, and yeah, the box art is pretty simple. It's a nice blue box, which is the usual colour for the Weekend edition scheme. On the side here, just a repeat of the box art, and on the top here, we have a little bit more detail about the two schemes. So, we've got one from VF38 from Guadalcanal in late 1943, and another one from VF15, the USS Essex, in October 24th, 25th, 1944. Pretty similar schemes. The Hellcats didn't vary too much. They started with the three colours for the Navy, and then later on in the war they had the all-over gloss blue. Although this one's got some interesting squadron markings with the white on the top there, which is a little bit unique, but otherwise pretty similar schemes. So when you open up the box, you'll get the decals in a nice little piece of plastic here, the clear parts which come on a separate sprue in a separate bag, the grey plastic parts here, which are about 3 sprues in one bag there, and you've got the instructions. So we'll start off by having a look at these. So on the front here, you've just got a sprue map, and you've got a little guide for what parts are not going to be used, which are shaded in that sort of light blue. So there's a few little bits here and there for different variants, and the later model, I think, had a different window at the back, so that's what the clear parts are there for. Then you've just got the colour glide here, which is in, I believe, Mr. Colour and Humbrol. So yeah, you can do conversions for them pretty easily, although like I've said, it's pretty standard for US Navy aircraft. A few little warnings, and you've got your instruction keys here, which are good. So when you open up, I should point out that they're in a booklet format, which I'm a big fan of. It means you can obviously have it on a pretty small desk, and you can circle things and all of that, which is pretty good. And it's also in a sort of glossy paper, which is in colour, which is good. Although they haven't done colour for the painting guide, they've just got a little symbol with the colour code. So that's a little bit harder to follow, but still pretty standard. So assembly begins as usual with the cockpit for this aircraft. You've got a nice detailed looking sidewall there with a rear bulkhead and the seat, front instrument panel, a joystick, and then you've got a separate bucket seat with decals included for the instruments and also the seat belts, which is a nice touch. A few more little sidewall details and decals, the rudder pedals which go on the floor there. And once you've done that, you just put the tail wheel, looks like another small window or possibly some sort of piece that goes in the middle there, right? Maybe an air intake, and then the side windows and the cockpit, and then you can join the fuselage halves together. You've got the option here to cut open the bottom there to fit the fuel tank, I believe, for marking option A. Then we've got the wings. Interestingly, they've moulded the machine guns as a single piece, all 3 of them, and you insert that into the bottom wing, and then you put the top wing on. Then you install the wings and the elevators, and then you move on to assembling the engine. So the engine's actually in quite a few pieces. You've got the sort of main cowling section and then the actual front of the cowling there, which are all 3 separate pieces. And then for the engines, you've got 2 separate sections with all of the cylinders. Then you've got the gearbox and a separate little piece here, as well as a small pin that fits into the gearbox. If you don't glue that to the gearbox or the base of the engine there, you should be able to have a propeller that spins, which is a nice touch. Moving over the page, you then install the engine and put the cowling on over the top there. Then you move on to the landing gear, which looks like you've got 2 options for wheels. Looks like they're different tread patterns. I don't think you've got a weighted option, but we'll have to have a look. You might have to sand them if you want to add a bit of weight to them. But yeah, you basically install the tyre of your choice to the hubcap, then glue that to the strut for the landing gear, and then there's a fairing that goes over that. Fuel tank here for marking option number A, which comes in 3 pieces. Looks pretty easy to put together. A few little bits here and there. These look like a flap that goes on the landing gear, which is interesting. I believe they sort of like the P40 rotate 90 degrees and then fold back. Then you install the landing gear, optional fuel tank, a little pitot tube on the wing. And once you've done that, you've just got the canopy, the two-piece canopy, so you can have it open or closed if you should choose. And then optional either wiring or a separate part for the radio antenna there. And then you put the propeller onto the little pin there. And then I believe you've got markings on the next page. Yep. So the thing I really love about Eduard is they'll actually go into a fair bit of detail about the markings. So if you want to know more about the pilot and the history behind the plane, that's really awesome that they've done it. So you've got this one, which is from the Essex, which is a bit later on in the war. It talks a bit about the history of the aircraft in combat and the pilot, Arthur Singer Jr., and talking a bit about how he achieved A status and the DFC with this aircraft. So that's pretty cool. It's got the history. As for the painting guide, like I've said, pretty standard. They're three-tone US Navy colours, and there's all the decals. Eduard actually split it up, so you've got the main stencils there with the little red numbers for each marking, and then on the back here you have a common stencil position. So I think it's more accurate to do the main markings first and then put the stencils over the top. But I'm sure in some cases it wouldn't, but that's at the modeller's discretion, I suppose. And with the second scheme here, you've got a little bit of history about where the squadron was. I don't think it talks about the particular pilot, but it does say that it's a bit unusual that this particular aircraft actually had a pin-up, which was not common in the Navy, surprisingly. And it's got the interesting white markings on the top there, but otherwise pretty similar. I think it's been interesting. Eduard also showed a bit of weathering with the exhausts there. So whether you want to use that as a reference or not, that's up to you. I suppose it probably would be a bit better to get some actual reference photos, but otherwise you could just go as that as a rough guide. So yeah, looking pretty good. The common stencils go into a fair bit of detail, even on the basic weekend edition kits. And I think, as you can see, there's all of those little stencils that you've got to put into the right place. I think it's good, though, that they have an enlarged version of what all the text is, so that you can see a little bit more easily where things go. Yeah, and it's fantastic. They go into that level of detail in the instructions, and they're all very clear to follow. So as I've mentioned, we've got 3 dark grey sprues of plastic here. We've got the first one here, which contains several different options for cowlings for different variants of the Hellcat. There's actually 3 different sets with little different, individual differences on each of them. So it's pretty cool. They've gone into, obviously, a lot of depth to get each variant of the Hellcat correct. And all of the details are recessed, and you can see they've actually done some of the rivets in a few places. It's pretty hard to see. But yeah, there are actually individual rivets that are recessed into the edges of the cowling there, so pretty fantastic detail. Here we've got the elevators. Again, it's got recessed details and a few little raised bumps for the texturing on the fabric control surfaces there, looking pretty fantastic, and all the molds are pretty clean on that part. Fuselage, again, recessed details. There's not as many rivet lines on this one. There are a few little spots where they've done the rivets, but mostly it's just the recessed panel lines, which look pretty good. The Wildcat was definitely a bit of a boilerplate looking aircraft, especially at the front, at the rear. They sort of were a little bit better with making the front more smooth and aerodynamic, but then at the back they sort of let it go a little bit, which reduced the cost. So it's a bit of an interesting aircraft to model. But yeah, details look pretty good. Got all the access ports and the handles there to get up. Fabric detailing on the controls on the rudder there, which look pretty nice. Even got the little trim tab. So yeah, quite fantastic level of detail. They've done the exhausts there. They haven't drilled out the exhausts, but you can always do that later on. It's a bit tricky, I think, to mould something that fine there. And the wings join here, and they've done a massive sort of indent for them, so they should fit really quite nice and snug. Definitely won't be coming loose. And on the inside, there's a tiny bit of raised details for the inside of the cockpit there, although I believe most of the detail actually comes from the sidewall panels, but they've done a few little raised bits for the ribbing and some extra little controls there, which look pretty nice. The front of the engine cowling looking pretty good there, with the air intakes for both the engine and the radiators there, and another elevator here, but pretty similar to the other one. So yeah, details look pretty nice. I don't really see any flashing or imperfections. One thing I've noticed is there's actually no guide pins for the fuselage halves. Fortunately, there's quite a fair few little bits like the cockpit and that should help you line them up, but I think it probably is a little bit of a problem that there aren't any guide pins on the fuselage to help line the halves up, so if you that might be a bit of a struggle when you're building it. But otherwise, doesn't look too bad, and the details are fantastic on this one. The wings come as two pieces here, and as you can see, the detail on them is absolutely fantastic. All of it is recessed except for the raised detailing on the control surfaces, which looks accurate. Some really nice details on the rivets. They've done some of the ones for the access hatches for the ammunition a little bit more deeply, which I think looks pretty good. Yeah, and they've done even the sort of, I guess you'd call it like an interlocking pattern where the hatches are for them. So yeah, detail looks quite fantastic on the upper surface there. On the lower surface, we've got the holes for where the casings from the spent shells come out, which looks pretty nice. Again, there's lots of really nice riveted details, all recessed. And they've done some raised detailing for the inside of the landing gear bay, which looks quite fantastic there. Again, really cleanly moulded. Oh, there's even some raised control joints, which look really quite good. Yeah, fantastic detail, and looks like the moulds are pretty clean. They've done a few guide pins here to help you line up the wings, and the elevators, or the flaps and the ailerons should help line up the lower and the upper surface quite nicely. And you can see they've done a little recess for where the machine gun part fits in, so hopefully that fits nicely, but it looks like it should. Few inspection ports as well on the underside of the upper wing, because I've moulded the control surfaces to the upper surface. So it's a little bit less defined where the aileron is on the upper surface, but it might be a bit more exaggerated on the underside, which should look pretty decent. But yeah, you might though still want to use a scribing tool just to make some of those panels a bit deeper, especially on the aileron, but still pretty good. And there's this one sprue here which contains all of the fine details, and there is quite a lot to look through. Here you've got the rear bulkhead with the headrest for the pilot. Not amazingly detailed, but it's very cleanly moulded, which is good. Here we've got the landing gear bay doors, and yeah, they're quite nicely done, very cleanly moulded, and the details look pretty good on them. You've got quite a few rockets, although I believe those are for a later version of the Hellcat, although you probably could build it however you really wanted to. Looks like there's also some cannons, which the aircraft might have been fitted with at a later variant, or perhaps a special version. Looks like some hard points for a few little extra ammunitions for the underside. Not too sure if any of them are for this variant though. Then we've got the instrument panel, and it's all recessed detailing, so a little bit tricky to paint up and detail, but fortunately there are instrument decals included, so that looks quite nicely done. The engines are fantastically detailed, and as I've said, they're moulded in quite a few different pieces. So this, I believe, would be the front set of cylinders, and that looks really quite fantastically detailed. They've even got some of the ignition wires and that moulded in, so yeah, and it's very clean. You can see all the ridges on the cylinders. That'll paint up really quite nicely. Looks like we've got the hubcap here with some nice details on the main side. They've drilled out some of the holes there for the hubcap, which looks really quite nicely detailed. Looks like we've got a few bombs, but again, I don't think that's for any variant of the Hellcat included here, although there is the fuel tank, which looks quite nicely detailed there and cleanly moulded. We've got a little bit of flash on some of the machine gun parts here, but they're looking not too bad at all. This is sort of the main part that goes between the fuselage halves, I believe. So that's got a little bit of recessed detailing there, which looks nice. Joystick there looking pretty good. They've done a little bit of a recessed texture on the base there, and they've done the details for the firing buttons and all of that, which looks really good. Here we've got the tail wheel, which looks really fantastically detailed. They've done the rubber on the outside of the wheel. They've done recessed details for the struts, and yeah, it's all looking quite fantastic there. Looks like a little piece for the fuel tank to attach to. These might be the landing gear flaps. They're pretty basic parts, but they're quite nicely done and very cleanly moulded. Here we've got the sort of gearbox cover for the engine, which looks fantastic. They've done raised details for the rivets, and yeah, it all looks really quite accurate. Rudder pedals looking quite good there, nice recessed details. The floor of the cockpit looking really quite good there. Fair few little holes to help line up some of the parts, which is good. We've got a separate instrument panel here which doesn't have any of the recessed details, which might be a bit easier for the decals to stick to. I probably would prefer to do this just because it gives you a little bit more depth, but there is the option to have a flat, slightly easier to apply the decals to instrument panel there. A few more details for the engine, looking good there. Some radio antenna. You've got the pitot tube there, looking quite fantastic, and again, very cleanly moulded. We've got another set of wing machine guns, which have a bit of a nasty seam on them. I'm not actually too sure which one we use in the end, or what the difference is, but there probably is one, otherwise why would Eduard have bothered moulding two? Yeah, it looks like they come as a single piece, so you shouldn't have to glue them halves together, so don't quite know what that is. Looks like a radar pod. I believe there is a night fighter version of the Hellcats, so Eduard have obviously included that in their tooling, which is pretty awesome. You could, if you have the spare decals or wish to do one out of the this kit, you could. Then you've got the spinner, or the rear section for the propeller. So that front section slots into the gearbox, and then that rear part there acts as sort of a bulk or washer to stop it from coming out. Fantastic detailing on the tyres here. You've got a recessed sort of diamond texture for one of them, and then more of a smooth couple of ridges on one of them. So yeah, looking really quite nicely detailed there. Landing gear struts are looking really good as well. They're nice and detailed, and the molds on them are really clean, so pretty good there. Here we've got the instrument or the sidewalls for the cockpit with some really fantastic raised details, looking really quite good there. Then we've got the seat, which doesn't have a lot of detail to it, but it's a pretty basic part. Looks like some kind of fairing, but I'm not quite sure what it's used for, and possibly a very small bomb. And then we've got the propeller, which has got some pretty nice detailing on the system to change the angle of the blades there. So yeah, it all looks really quite fantastic. And finally, we've got the clear parts here, which come in a separate little bag. And there's a few different options here for the early and the late war Hellcats with the different windows for the rear. So I think the early ones were slightly larger. And as you can see, these are quite curved parts. So if I put my finger on this one, you can see it distorts a fair bit. And the plastic is a little bit thick. They are quite complex and curved shapes, so it's pretty hard to not get any distortion out of them. They've done raised frames for the edges of the canopy, so that should be nice and easy to paint. And like I've said, they've got them in two halves, so you can slide the canopy open and shut, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, all the details look pretty good. You don't actually have a clear gun sight, which is a bit interesting. It's just the windows, but you could always, I suppose, change that if you wanted to. One thing I noticed also is the wings don't come as separate sections, so if you want to do this aircraft with its wings folded up, unfortunately that's going to need a fair bit of scratch building and cutting and changing of things. I think it's a bit of a shame Eduard didn't do it with the option to have the wings folded up, since it's a carrier plane, but oh well, I suppose if you're desperate enough you can hack away at the wings and fold the wings up. But otherwise, plastic parts look really excellent. Here we've got the decals, and you've got two sheets of them. You've got this one here, which includes all of the instrument panel details and separate little sections for the cockpit panel, which is pretty good. I like that they've done it in separate sections so that when you apply it, it'll be a bit easier. Formation lights there, and then they've done the individual aircraft markings and the seat belts. So yeah, there's a little bit of a weird kind of film on them, but that might come off with a little bit of water. Eduard tend to do really amazing decals, and I like that on the seatbelts they've actually done like a metallic effect on the buckles. So yeah, really nicely detailed there. And that's just the main kind of markings. The common stencils here are absolutely tiny. I don't know if you can read them very easily. And they appear to have both a black and white and a white variant. So if you're doing different aircraft, you might want to have some of the markings either in white or black. So that's really awesome that they've included those. And yeah, if you want to do a basic model, you can just stick with these stencils. But if you really want to go the extra mile and add the extra depth, you still have that option. So that's pretty cool. And speaking of extra mile, here we have the contents for the Profipack. This is a older one, as I mentioned. I got this one second hand, but it basically hasn't been opened, so it's pretty indicative of what it would have been like brand new. These days, the Profipacks tend to have a golden trim on them, rather than this older orange one, but they do a different colour to tell it apart from the Weekend edition, which is nice. And with this older box, again, it's painted and it looks really nice. You've got a more detailed picture of the Hellcat with some background, so it's over the ocean and it's shot down a Japanese aircraft. Not sure what type of plane it is. Looks like a later war kind of aircraft, possibly a dive bomber or something. Someone in the comments can identify that plane. But yeah, quite nice box art there. On the side here, we've got like a schematic of the aircraft and then a repeat of the box art. And on the top here, pretty much the exact same, repeat on the sides. On the back here, we've actually got the different schemes. So one of the big differences with the Profipacks is you get extra markings. This one includes 5, although I believe most of the time you get 6 markings with the professional packs. So yeah, they're pretty similar again, because Hellcats pretty much always had that kind of standard US Navy colour scheme. Although there are some post-war exceptions such as the drones, but I digress. But they've got detail again about the history of each of these aircraft, so they're from some pretty different squadrons. Like we've got one from the Lexington, another one that was from VF-33, VF-27, which is interesting. It's got the face on the front there, and I think Airfix did that with their 24 scale one, so that's pretty cool. We've got one from Intrepid, and another one from Yorktown, so nice reflection of different markings and some different little variations in them, which is pretty cool. We won't have a look at the plastic parts in this kit, because if you have a brief look, you'll see they're actually exactly the same, so there's no extra parts. A few have actually come loose since this kit is secondhand. It's probably been around for quite a while, and it's molded in a different color of plastic, unless it's aged, but I think that's just a different color. So yeah, identical to the Weekend Edition Sprues. Where the variation comes is obviously, as well as the extra schemes, you also get some masks for the canopies, which are all pre-cut, which is really quite excellent. That'll save a lot of time for you airbrushers out there. And you also have the photo-etch. And Eduards photo-etch is really fantastic, as you'll see. So not only do you have unpainted photo etch such as this for all of the ignition wires for the engines and all these extra little details for the radiators and God knows what with some of these things. But the detail will be fantastic when you use these. But you also get pre-colored ones for the cockpit, which is really awesome. And not only that, you've got extra ones to show a bit more depth. So you basically layer them up. So you put this onto the instrument panel, then you put this extra one over the top. So you get not only the black instrument dials, but you also get the interior green covers for them that add extra depth. And yeah, they're fantastically detailed. You've got the seat belts, you've got sidewall panels there with recesses in them, and they just look wonderfully three-dimensional and detailed. Even got throttle quadrant there, all sorts of little things. They look absolutely fantastic. And that's the extra things that you get with the Profipacks. So if you're a fan of photo etch and want some extra detail, I think it definitely is worth the extra little bit of money that you spend on them. And obviously the masks too, that saves a lot of time. And extra choice for decals. So these ones are a bit older. They don't actually have that same funny film, and it looks like all of the common stencils are, unless there's an extra sheet in here. It doesn't seem to be a sheet in this one. But yeah, it looks like they've actually done it all on one sheet, which is interesting. Yeah, but they look quite nicely done. A lot of detail has gone into these ones. I think it's pretty cool. You've got also some different effects. Like you've got the one from, I think, Yorktown had that sort of really rough looking 9-0. You might be better to hand paint it, but it does look like they've tried to do some feathering on the edges, so that might look pretty cool if it was applied. Yeah, and a few different variations on the stars there. You've got the sort of, I think it's 43 when they had the red put back on the roundel, but they very quickly took it back off when they realised that it looked a bit like a Japanese aircraft from a distance. And all the common stencils are still there, they're just done on the same sheet, so it's a little bit harder to find them and apply them, but still pretty decent. And the instructions here, they actually go into a lot more depth. They talk about the history of the aircraft, which is really awesome, and they go into quite a lot of depth there. Otherwise, layout is pretty similar. You've got, again, a sprue map here, but they've actually got the photo etch parts and the mask sheet included. And they'll show you where to apply the photo etch in these instructions too, which is pretty cool. As you can see, there's a fair bit of detailing that it then will add to the cockpit. Like there's entire steps here dedicated just to the seat belts. and adding the buckles and the flaps there, so you'll get a lot of detail out of that. A little bit less photo etch on the outside. There is a little bit for a part here, but not quite sure. I think that's sort of more interior. There was a bit of photo etch for the engine. Yeah, you can see there's a little bit on the gearbox and all of the wiring, which will be fun to try and hook up. Interestingly, this version of the kit, even though it's the F3, you've actually got some options for bombs and that. But that's more to do with the markings, I think, than the particular aircraft, so that's pretty cool that you've got those options. And the masking set, you've got instructions for applying them. I think... No, not really. It's sort of a bit more basic, but you can sort of tell where each one goes. And then you've got all of the markings here. No common stencil separate marking guide. It's all in the one. And again, lots of nice detail about each of the individual aircraft, which is, yeah, I think that's really cool. So there you have it, two fantastic 1/72nd scale F6F-3 Hellcat kits by Eduard, and I think the Eduard kits are absolutely brilliant. The detail on them is fantastic. With the Profipacks, you've even got that extra option for all those photo etch stuff, and yeah, it's good that they've got both of these kits as two different ranges. With the Weekend Edition, if you're a bit newer to modelling, it's still a pretty easy to put together kit, and the details are still fantastic. But if you want some extra options for markings and go to extra mile with detail, then you've got the Profipacks, which add the extra decals and the photo etch. These kits retail for pretty similar prices too, which is great. Your standard 72nd scale single engine fighter from Eduard retails from about $20 to $30, although there are some exceptions. For $20, which is what I paid for this kit brand new, it is fantastic. It puts a pretty similar price range to some of Airfix's older kits, but this definitely is a lot more detailed. There are a few other brands out there that I think do the Hellcat, but I'm not too familiar with all of them, but I would have to say this is probably the best. The Profipacks, I've paid $15 for this one because it was second-hand. However, they usually retail for only about $5 to $10 more than these ones, the basic Weekend Editions. So, highly recommend these ones if you're interested in the Hellcat. I'll probably be taking a look at some more of Eduard kits in the future because I think they're a pretty fantastic brand. Thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and feel free to subscribe to my channel to help things out. A massive shout out, as always, to my wonderful patrons for helping me fund buying these kits and making all of these videos. And also a shout out to Tectonic Hobbies, the local store on the Sunshine Coast, where you can buy the Eduard kits and, of course, many others. Anyways, thanks again, and until the next video, take care and model on.